All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Fearcast. This is the podcast dedicated to OCD and anxiety spectrum disorders and getting your life back. I'm your host, Kevin Foss, and I'm a licensed therapist specializing in those things that I just mentioned. Thank you all so much for joining me for today's podcast. For those of you who are new to the podcast, this is a question and answer based podcast. If you have a question about OCD and anxiety stuff and treatment about it and how to, again, get your life back, you can go over to fearcastpodcast.com. You can send me a message there by clicking on the submit a question link. You can also send me an audio question, which goes to the tip of the top of the list. If you want to cut the line, you can do that by clicking on the speech pipe button, or you can record your voice over at Instagram by sending me a DM and clicking on the little microphone button there in the DM section. Record your voice and I will get it, consider it, and likely put it up on a future episode. Again, you can also just record your voice and send it over to questions@fearcastpodcast.com. I think I mentioned this last episode. If you like the podcast, give it a like, give it a thumbs up, give it a bunch of stars, the appropriate amount of stars that you feel that this podcast deserves. If you think it's 5, awesome. I agree with you. If you think it's 1, I think you're wrong, and that's fine. You can be wrong if you would like, but you do you, okay? And if you're over at YouTube, again, I'm trying to build that over there. If you like it over at YouTube, if you're watching it over at YouTube, or if you just have nothing better to do and you're over at YouTube, click subscribe. I do a star, a like, a button, a thumbs up, whatever it is over there. I forget over there. And if you have any comments about this episode, I want you to put that in the comments section. So we'll see how it goes. Today is going to be a weird episode. But again, thank you all for new viewers, new listeners out there. Thank you for taking me along with you while you're at work, while you're on your drive, while you're at the gym, wherever you are. Thanks for going along for the ride, or taking me along for your ride, as it were. So I don't really have anything on the top thus far. I got some cool news that I'm going to be able to speak at the upcoming Faith and OCD conference. I'm going to be joining a couple people there, so there'll be more information for that as we get nearer to that. I don't have any details about like what we're going to be talking about, or how we're going to be talking about it, or who exactly is going to be on. It's going to be a surprise, but I'm really excited. I think that's one of the ones that I've wanted to speak at for a long time, and I feel honored that they would allow me to be a part of it. Outside of that, man, kids are back in school. My kids are back in school. I'm really excited. Don't tell them. I'm really excited they're back, because now I get like some morning times before I have to go to clients that I can work on the house and do house projects without them. And I'm excited, but don't tell them that. Don't tell them that. It's unimportant. All right, why don't we just get into the question at this point? So I'm going to say this at the top end of things, everybody. We're going to be talking about some sexually explicit conversation today. Now, it's if you are squicked out by that, or if there are little ears that don't need to hear that, or if there are big ears that don't want to hear that, shoo, get away. Don't listen. But also, Mom, if you're listening to this, just for today, don't do this for today. So sometimes if they're driving over to our place, it's a long drive, it's like an hour's drive, and they're going to watch the kids or hang out or something like that, they'll listen to the podcast to kind of hear the shenanigans that I'm up to. Don't do that to yourself. It's going to be, but you know what? You're the boss of you. If you want to hear me talk about some weird stuff, go for it. Mazel tov. All right, so why don't we just get right into it? So how it normally goes, I read the question and then I yammer on about it. So this comes from Anne. So Anne said, I was diagnosed with POCD, so pedophile OCD, but I fear my therapist got it wrong because I still like Lolicon anime content. I'm not sure whether I should be avoiding it or not, if they got my diagnosis wrong or not, or what to do to be treated. What should I think about this? That's the extent of their question. So the problem with the extent of their question is it leaves me with so many questions, so many extra questions. I also recognize I complain about questions that are way too long and there's too much information. What have we learned? Kevin likes to complain, but I think y'all knew that by now. So it's consolidated, it's concise, but it's missing some details. So I'm gonna have to make some stuff up. So when I got this question, I was like, okay, POCD, certainly talked about that before. We know how to handle that, right? We know how to talk about that sort of stuff. But then I went, well, I don't know what Lolicon anime is. Now, some of you out there are like giggling because you know what it is. So I had to Google it. Now, when I Googled Lolicon anime, I got a big warning that popped up that said, warning: sexually explicit images and content is illegal, and you can get into a whole bunch of trouble by continuing the search. I went, huh, that's weird. And then I added, what is Lolicon anime? Because I need to know. I'm sorry, I don't personally watch a ton of anime, and by a ton of anime, I don't watch anime. And it's not because I think it's bad, it's just I never grew up watching it, so it never really captured my imagination. Some of my friends did, and they're into it. Awesome, go for it. So I had to Google it, figure out what it is. So I clicked on one of the first articles that came up. It is from a law firm. So for those of you who are in the know, you already know. But for those of you who don't know, I'm going to give you a little bit of a snapshot. I'm just going to read from this article what it says. So Lolicon is a term derived from the phrase Lolita complex and refers to a genre of manga, anime, or artwork that depicts young or young-looking characters in a sexualized manner. It goes on to say, the characters are often portrayed as prepubescent or very young girls, sometimes in sexually explicit contexts. The term originates from Japan, where the genre has a controversial presence, but has spread to other parts of the world in various forms of media. It goes on to say that in this article, it explains why Lolicon exists in a legal gray area in California, at least. This is from a California law firm. So that's what Lolicon is. So with that context in mind, let's go revisit that question. They said, I was diagnosed with POCD, so pedophile OCD, but I fear my therapist may have got it wrong because I still like Lolicon anime content. I'm not sure whether I should be avoiding it or not, if they got the diagnosis wrong or not, or what to do to be treated about this. So you can see where this question, I really like this question. I think it's an important type of question because sometimes things will happen in therapy land, things will happen in people's lives where things seemingly are at odds with one another. And something that can appear as an interest can also appear as a trigger. And one thing that can be an interest can also be the complete opposite of what it is that you're wanting, or what is it that you're fearing, or it can just add to the complexity of OCD. One thing that's like really coming to mind when I talk about that, and maybe in reference to the scrupulosity thing I just mentioned, is people who are very religious, who are interested in faith, who also have religious scrupulosity. So people who are devout in whatever faith that they are, and they then go to rabbinical school, they go to seminary, whatever it might be, and they're going to learn a lot more about it. In the process about it, they are, yes, interested in it, and it is part of the thing that they fear the most, right? So it is this complexity. It's, I mean, maybe another way to say another way, or a bad way, or a weird way to say it. It's kind of like you can have contamination obsessions and you can also like the house to be clean, right? These two things can't exist at the same time. So to that end, I'm going to start out by saying yes, POCD, so pedophile OCD, and a genuine interest in Lolicon can exist. Now, I'm going to say that, and I'm going to wait to be canceled. Maybe. We'll see. We'll see what y'all have to say about that. But does the interest in Lolicon inherently make you a pedophile? I'm going to say no. Does it not inherently not make you a pedophile, or not mean that you do not have, or do in fact have, or either way, mean that you have POCD? I'm going to also say no, right? These two things, what I'm trying to paint with this is that these two things can be held in tension, and it can be held in conflict with one another, but they're also obviously held in relationship to one another. So this is the tightrope that we're going to be walking today. And this is one of those things that I'm going to start out again, and by encouraging you, if you haven't already, really be chatting with your therapist about this, right? For situations like this, and this is where, like where the complexity of these topics are maybe not addressed as much in books or in shows or in other content talking about OCD. Because of these complexities, it's hard to make these big blanket statements about POCD or about interest or about things that we're talking about today without having some nuance to them. And the problem is, because there's not a whole lot of information in it, I'm going to be making it up. I'm going to be guessing at what some of the complexities are, some of the nuances. So as you asked, what are some ways to think about this? That's what I'm going to be trying to do today, is to give you some stuff to think about. And I don't think I'm going to be able to give you an answer, because I ultimately don't think that there is going to be an answer to it in the way that I'm going to be talking about it. So I'm going to be giving you some things to consider, some things to challenge yourself with, and again, some things to process with your therapist. And again, hopefully you are seeing a therapist. So right here at the top, we can already say, you know what, I can't diagnose you as a pedophile. I can't diagnose you as someone who has OCD. I don't really know. I don't know your case. I don't know your situation, only what you said, right? So I can't diagnose you as a pedophile or not, right? But I do know from what you're saying, you are ruminating about POCD content, right? You're also ruminating about your diagnosis, right? So we have kind of these two maybe subtypes of OCD. Again, all the subtypes are just OCD, right? For those of you who are new to the podcast, what a one to jump in on. POCD is pedophile OCD. It is really just OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, a concern about obsessive thoughts, repetitive, intrusive thoughts that cause anxiety or unwanted feeling states that are dealt with through compulsive actions. They can be overt, they can be covert, meaning things that are just existing in your mind, or things you're doing outside of yourself, stuff that other people can see, right? And through that compulsive process, it reinforces the obsession itself. And it is a never-ending process where the goalpost is moved constantly. And ultimately, through treatment, we're learning to pull out compulsions, to live with and sit with the discomfort and uncertainty, and show your brain that these thoughts are not dangerous. They're uncomfortable, but they are not inherently dangerous or bad simply because you have them. Now, that is OCD, but the OCD can be about various different things, and the POCD is a category, a subtype of that. Now, we also have meta OCD, which again is just obsessing about, do you have OCD, right? It is questioning whether, and this one can occur a lot through a lot of different other, and I have another question that I'll answer soon, that the person was talking about, they only have one subtype, and cool that you only have one subtype. They feel like they're a unicorn. They feel like they're weird or bad or something like that for having just one. A lot of people, it's mixed. Some people just have one theme or one type. Some people have a smattering of other ones. But Anne is obsessing a little bit about the diagnosis itself, whether or not they have it, whether or not it's the right diagnosis. So whatever your therapist was going through that led them to this conclusion, and I'm jumping to the end here a little bit, is trust it. See where it goes. See what the therapist is talking about. Maybe talk to them about this concern. Hopefully you have. So let's start to address some of this. So again, POCD is just going to be OCD about the fear that you're attracted to minors or will be, right? Now, with the evidence of your interest in Lolicon anime, OCD is just grabbing onto that interest to whatever degree you have that interest, and is using that as evidence for its accusation that you are genuinely a pedophile. Now, this is the way that OCD tends to work, right? I love it. I love that it's said that OCD starts with the conclusion and asks you to gather evidence, right? Or asks you to look for evidence for or against, right? But it starts with this accusation: you're a pedophile, and then it says, here's why. Right? Now, or either here's the one bit of evidence, or here's the couple bits of evidence that it has, but it doesn't gather the whole story. It gathers some of the story. And then it gathers a little bit from over here. And then it asks you to kind of forget those things over there, but then it brings up this thing over here. And it gathers all of it together and excludes those things over there. And then it says, see? and then it asks you to go and disprove it. And now in the disproving process, you have left reality. Remember, you've left that thing over there, and you are fighting OCD on OCD's terms. Because again, in the world of anxiety, anything is possible, right? Anything as irrational, as unlikely, anything is possible. So it's going to try to grab onto those things and then say, well, let's play with this idea. And as you try to fight with it and disprove it and bring up evidence why it's not true, even if you did a rock solid argument against your theoretical pedophilia, it's still going to say, but it's possible. It's down there, it's deep, or it's coming. Or again, it goes back to, in your case, I wonder if it constantly is going to hearken back to your interest in Lolicon and say, see, there's this. And because of this, that you cannot disprove it. You cannot talk about it otherwise, because as we just talked about, Lolicon is, by definition, a anime story, anime images, focusing on young, prepubescent looking people in a sexualized manner. So naturally, it's going to grab onto that. All right, so my question with this is going to be, well, and this would be part of if you were in my office, how would we be talking about this? How would we break this down, right? Because there are going to be some people out there who are going to disagree with me. I don't really care. If you were in my office and you messaged me, so you want to hear my thoughts, so F those people. All right, so if you were in my office, I'd be talking about like, well, what does Lolicon mean to you? And here's one question that OCD is not asking. What part of Lolicon do you like? What aspects do you like of it? Because I think that's important in this. And I think that's important to start to investigate the truth, the elements of the story that are relevant and the elements of the story, the feared story, that are completely irrelevant. And we're trying to break this down and to look at it. Now, again, going back to those therapists, I just had a vision of therapists in my mind who are disagreeing with me. And they would say, just get to the exposures, don't argue with it, don't get into the pit with it. I have problems with that because I think there are some things that if we're just saying, well, you need to sit with the uncertainty regardless, I don't think that gives someone really reason to jump into the exposures. I think we want to break some of this down, or to look at some of it and to develop a new understanding of it, or a more nuanced understanding, because what parts of it are we wanting to keep? What parts of it are we wanting to get rid of? What parts are we having to sit with? Okay. All right. So I asked what parts, right? So, because I wonder, like, I was wondering about if, this is a story that I could imagine happening, but let's say someone interested in this, they might have found this type of anime when they were very young, and they might have been finding these stories at a very formative part of their life, and informative part about their, sexual awakening, and and if they found this at a younger age, maybe during these formative years, where this sexually explicit material was actually of like-aged individuals, right? And that's when this interest, or this attachment to it, clicked on. Now, you might say, no, I watched it when I was 40, in which case that's fine. But that's fine. That's more stuff to talk about. But you could certainly see where, as someone's reading through this or seeing this type of anime, it unlocked something for them. And it unlocked something for them at a very pivotal time in their sexual development or in their mental development. And I think that happens for a lot of folks, is that as you kind of go through life and you're experiencing things and noticing things, a window opens and all of a sudden you notice that thing. You're like, oh my gosh, I didn't notice that before. So I'm going to share a very weird story. But these interests can kind of stick with people and kind of carry on throughout the course of their life. And it now serves as part of the things that are, the things that turn you on, the things that serve as kind of the sexual constellations in your life, the things that get you going, turn you on, whatever it might be. If we're talking the sexual accelerants, right? If we're going to talk about it from a arousal non-concordance perspective, right? And so I was talking about this with, incidentally, my wife before I started recording this, and we have very weird conversations too. And then she was like, "Well, yeah, it's kind of like," and she's kind of like, she brought this up. It's kind of like Casper for you. And I was like, "Where are you going with this?" And she's like, "Oh yeah, Christina Ricci from Casper." And I went, "Oh, that's right, Christina Ricci from Casper." Now, I'm old now, but when I first saw Casper, Christina Ricci was right. It was in that movie. I think she was maybe 13, 14, maybe 15, right? A minor. But guess what? I was 10, right? So she was right in that range, and that awakened something in me. I went, oh, Christina Ricci. That's interesting. Now, here's the thing. I had to Google that, and then I realized that, and if you Google Christina Ricci in Casper, it turns out I'm mostly attracted to a giant forehead. Her face is like, I'm going to go with a third of it is forehead, and then the rest of it is face. And now, by the way, I also know that I'm entirely excluding Christina Ricci from ever being a guest on this podcast. I didn't have high hopes for it in the first place, but the awkwardness of this is certainly going to disqualify me. All right, point is that at that, I don't then envision that image or that person like currently as like, oh, that person as she is in that moment, as someone that is part of my, sexual constellation now. I'm not like imagining Christina Ricci in that movie and just like whipping it out at any time just to that image, right? It was reflective of that time when there was this like-aged person. So I can imagine someone being interested in this as someone who was a like-aged individual. Now, let's also shift over to the idea of what fetishes are. And it's possible this could fit into one of those fetishes or paraphilias, right? So fetishes are confusing as to why they exist, what they mean, when they get started, right? There are stories about people who are into spanking because they were spanked as a kid. There are people who are into spanking because they were never spanked as a kid, right? It's why is it something for somebody and not something for somebody else? Who freaking knows? But they exist due to this interest and kind of, and they get linked to sexual arousal. And it doesn't always reflect who it is that you are, what it is that you're about, nor does it speak to the exact opposite all the time of who it is that you are, right? So there could be people who were spanked as kids who like being spanked as adults. There could be people who are dominant in their regular life and they are dominant in the bedroom. And again, there are people who could be dominant in real life and you could be very submissive in the bedroom and seemingly the complete opposite. And there is something that is enticing and rousing about that relinquishing of control. And again, the flip side is someone who is turned on by taking on a ton of that control in the bedroom. So why is there just something about this that kind of gets you going, Anne? Now, again, there might be people out there who are listening to this who know a heck of a lot more about fetishes and sexual arousal than I do, and surely there are. And if you want to be a guest on the podcast to talk about it, let's do it. Reach out. But this is part of the stuff that we'd want to be processing through. And like, what does this subject that you keep coming back to and that anxiety is coming back to that is significant and meaningful and is dangerous to you, right? And again, are you attracted to the child element of it? Or are you repulsed by that element of it, right? Again, it goes back to like, what parts of the story are you into? What parts of the story are you not into? All right, so you asked 3 specific questions. You said, should I be avoiding it? Is the diagnosis wrong? And what should I do to treat this? All right, so let's talk about those. So the first one, should you be avoiding this? Again, this is unclear, and I don't think there's exactly a right answer as to is this something that you should avoid, right? So let me go back to this this legal article, right? So it talks about it existing in this gray area, right? So it says the gray area exists because some Lolicon materials can be considered fictional and not involve real children. Before this, it talks about how it's a complex subject. It says possession, creation, and distribution of Lolicon materials that depict minors in a sexually explicit way can potentially be classified as child pornography, which is illegal both under California law and federal law. But again, it's this gray area because they're made of fictional materials, right, that do not involve real children. Then it goes on to say, even so, courts have or can and have interpreted certain explicit depictions of fictional minors as illegal under obscenity laws, right? So again, it is indeed in this gray area, and I think that's something to take note of in this process. Should you avoid it? I don't have that answer. You are the person who's going to be sitting in that legal gray area, and I think some of that is what roles do you want? What roles does Lolicon serve in your life? What values do you have around it? And how does it impact your OCD, right? So as far as like what role does it serve in your life? Is it kind of a hobby, an interest? Is it kind of a sexual or masturbatory subject for you? Right? Like, is, for lack of a better term, is the story good? Like, as you're reading through this anime, I don't know, how's the story? Like, are you reading it because, you know, gosh darn it, they tell these stories that warm your heart or are encouraging or uplifting, or the messages within them are super important and meaningful for your life and they give you purpose? I don't know. Is this one of those situations where it's like reading Playboy for the articles, or are you reading it for the sexual material aspect of it, right? And I think it's important to acknowledge both of those things, right? Because some people will watch, and going back to the fetish conversation, they're going to watch maybe more aggressive, more violent pornography, and that's something that gets them going. But they would never do that in real life, but in their brain, between their ears, all the stuff that's bouncing around, all of that is really important in getting them going, right? Similarly, right? Like 50 Shades of Grey was really popular for a hot second, right? But not all people who read it and who were interested in it wanted to be dominated or humiliated, but there was something about it that was intriguing. Now, my wife tried to read one of the stories and she just stopped after like the first chapter and she was like, the writing is terrible. And that's fine. I didn't read it, but primarily because it's a book and I didn't really want to sit down and read that book or books. But the point is that, is it something that is kind of getting you going or part of the story that you're into it? Now, are you also, what kind of into it are you, right? Are you into it as something that turns you on, as something that is intriguing to you sexually, but then afterwards, the kind of, quote, post-nut clarity that brings on a ton of this shame, right? But can you live with that in tandem with your POCD? Can this content as something that works for you sexually, can it work for your POCD, or is it working against you? Now, again, all of this is to answer the question, should you be avoiding it? And that's going to, I think, be a judgment call for you. Is this something that, one, you're willing to sit with the legal gray area of it? Are you willing to allow for this kind of juxtaposition between the content of it and the obsession itself? And can you find a way to live with it? I also want to know, like, are you wanting to keep it? I'm presuming that you are. Are you wanting to keep it? And, you know, what harm does it serve in your life, right? Is it a harm in your life? And furthermore, do you have any other values that would speak against keeping this in your life? So those are all some things to consider as you're moving forward and making the decision about whether or not this subject is worth it, right? So this isn't speaking to the merits of or the badness of the content. Is that just based on what you've experienced with it, is it something that you want to start reducing, or you're comfortable keeping it in your life and you want to find a way to keep it in your life, right? All right, so next is the diagnosis wrong, right? So I think that the ruminations about this, there can certainly be some more exposures for, right? I hope you're working with a therapist. It sounds like you are. sitting with the idea that maybe you don't, like the diagnosis is wrong. So then what does that mean that the diagnosis is wrong? What is it that you're going to have to face? What is the uncertainty that you're going to have to live with, quote, knowing that that the diagnosis is wrong? Is it that you're never going to get better? Is it that you're going to have the diagnosis wrong, treated for something completely wrong, and discover that you are indeed a pedophile, and that the world is going to explode, or that you're going to be judged, or that you're going to be rejected because of it? All those are great exposures to, again, sit and practice, right? Writing out those stories about what you fear would happen, and then letting that discomfort be present and letting it naturally subside as you continue to be in that feeling. Because what we're doing is we're saying, I don't know the future. I don't know what's going to happen because of this, but I'm going to have to let the unknown be there as I progress through treatment for this. Because what we do know is you've got some obsessions going on. I can't speak to the pedophilia nature of it, but I can speak to the obsessive parts about it. And if the obsessive parts are there, we need to practice cutting down on compulsions so that you can go live your life without them. And to that end, as far as the diagnosis being wrong, your therapist, your psychiatrist, or psychologist, whoever it is, you said they diagnosed you with POCD. Well, they're diagnosing you with POCD with the information that they currently have, right? Everything that you told them about. There's that rumination that people will have about, like, did I fully explain myself, like, to me? Did I fully explain myself to Kevin? Does Kevin fully understand where I'm coming from, what I'm feeling, what I'm thinking? Do they know the extent of it? Do they know the depths of it? Do they know how bad it really is? Do they know the quality it really is? Because what if they explained it wrong? Well, all that other story, right? And there's that sense that there's that fear that's to be sat with, right? But what I want you to do is to trust this therapist's diagnosis until new information arises. That's kind of what we do. We can't know everything at all times. We can't read the future. We can't know stuff that we can't know. And the therapist can't know stuff that they can't know. So you're going to trust that it is. And that feeling, that pull to go and relitigate, to go and reanalyze, to go and explain more, acknowledge that that's there and practice sitting with the unknown, that maybe it's wrong, and we'll have to see what happens. Because that event is somewhere off in the future, ages and ages hence. It's somewhere else. It's not right now. It's somewhere else. So for right now, we have to sit with the unknown about what the diagnosis actually is, right? All right. And that's a whole other story. It doesn't matter. All right. So then what to do to treat this, right? So I'm just going to give you a couple of things to think about within the treatment, because there's so much stuff that I don't know, and to give you specific exposures would be really tough. I know I've kind of talked about some scripts to do, but other things to do with this is, one, I really want you to process the meaning and the parts of Lolicon with your therapist and what role it serves for you. What you want to keep. Do you want to keep it? And is it helpful for you to continue to have it in your life, or is it actually serving as more of a problem in your life? And maybe it's not worth it for your overall mental health. And there are other ways that you can get those needs satisfied, perhaps, right? But again, this all goes back to the function of it and the value it serves for you in your life. If you do decide to keep it, you're going to have to accept a whole lot of uncertainty, right? And the exposures to being a pedophile and the effects it's going to have in your life are going to be important, right? If you decide that, the tension is acceptable and what you're getting out of Lolicon for whatever reason is going to be worth it for you, great. What does it mean to sit with the unknown about what it means for you and letting go of the rumination about what it means and the stories it says about you and all of that? That's going to be difficult, but that's going to be part of the work that you're going to have to engage with, right? And lastly, I want you to practice resisting compulsions, particularly around checking for reassurance, right? When this thought comes up about maybe my therapist doesn't know, maybe the diagnosis is wrong, maybe I actually am this thing, well, resist the compulsion and acknowledge, well, maybe I am and maybe I'm not. right? We kind of hold this over here as we continue to live our life, whatever it may be. And it's going to be uncomfortable and you're going to feel uncertain. And that's where we hold this life in tension. And there's almost this like door that's not going to be explored. And not because you don't want to explore it, or not because it doesn't feel like there's something worthwhile at the other end of it, but instead you're saying, I know what I get by going down that path. I know how it spins me out. I've seen this story before. And instead of following through with it, I'm going to let go of it and I'm going to move on with my life. And maybe I'm going to discover something in the future that is going to destroy me, that is going to break my life, that is going to cause something terrible happening to me. Maybe for me too. Maybe for other listeners who aren't me and Anne. So we'll have to see. But cutting down on those compulsions are going to be important. So, all right, Anne, I that's what I've got for you so far today. I hope it wasn't too confusing. I hope it wasn't too convoluted. But there's a lot to this. There's a lot that needs to be unpacked with a therapist. As you're trying to figure out what this means for you, what to do with it, and whether or not this diagnosis is right or wrong. But one thing I will encourage you to do is to keep going back. Keep trying, keep following through with some of this work and see that you can handle this anxiety, you can handle the uncertainty about it. I trust you. I believe that you can do it. So until next time, take a risk, challenge yourself, and don't take your brain too seriously. Bye. Thank you for listening to the Fearcast. If you would like your question answered on a future episode, please click on the Submit a Question link at fearcastpodcast.com. If you would like your question answered sooner, please send me a recording of your question to questions@fearcastpodcast.com or by sending me an audio message through Instagram by DMing me at fearcastpodcast on Instagram. If you like the Fearcast, please write a review on your podcast platform of choice. Please remember that the Fearcast is not a substitute for psychotherapy. If you need a little bit of help in your recovery, please go over to fearcastpodcast.com and click on the Find Help link, and there's going to be some information for you there. So until next time, take a risk, challenge yourself, and don't take your brain too seriously. Bye.